Once again, thanks for joining us for Migration 2020. Next up is Elizabeth Tennyson, the Executive Director of AOPA's You Can Fly initiative, and Mark Baker, President and CEO of AOPA.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Tennyson, and I'm the Executive Director of AOPA's You Can Fly program. Our mission is to get people flying and keep them flying. And working with you in the flight training community is a vital part of that. My team and I are going to talk about our programs in some detail. But first, we'd like you to hear from our president, AOPA's Mark Baker.
Hi, Mark Baker here with AOPA. I've got an interesting fact I'd like to share with you. People are making choices about how to move around the country. Maybe at this very moment, there are more people moving around in general aviation aircraft than there are on the airlines. One of the sad things that's going on for the airline community, and we feel badly for their issues at the moment, they're down somewhere between 70 and 80%. Last year, they moved about 850 million passengers left the Earth on an airliner. About 170 million people left the Earth on some type of a general aviation plane. But we know, sadly, that that's down by about 80%. We're up about 20%. People are making choices and using general aviation to accomplish their businesses, meet with their families, or for recreation. But general aviation is doing well during this pandemic. We hope the airlines continue to do better in the future. But AOPA is committed to maintaining the health of general aviation, and our most important pillar is growing the pilot population. As a front door to the flying, a strong flight training industry is essential to the health of GA. That's exactly why we started You Can Fly, funded by donations to our foundation. You Can Fly brings in young people through our free high school curriculum, helps pilot reduce the cost of flying by establishing flying clubs, bring pilots back to the fold with our Rescue Pilot seminars, and of course, supports flight training. Specific to flight training, AOPA is very active and supportive of the industry through several initiatives. Our annual awards program, typically presented here at the Redbird Migration, spotlights the best performers in the industry, chosen by the reviews given by the customer. Last year, the last normal year, the Flight Training Experience Awards were very well received. More than 900 schools and 1,800 CFIs were evaluated. More than 7,500 survey responses from participants. 57 schools and 59 CFIs were honored last year. This is a strange year. We created the AOPA Flight Training Experience Project, which you'll see here at this year's migration. Even in a challenging year, it's very important to recognize the value and the hard work done by flight schools and CFIs. We invited schools, instructors, and students to submit video stories that would inspire and demonstrate the resilience in the face of all of these challenges. You'll see those videos here at the Redbird Migration. We also created the AOPA Flight Training Advantage app to build on the learning experience. A big investment by AOPA to help you and instructors deliver superior training. The app allows instructors to grade flight in real time. When a flight is done, the system automatically creates the next lesson plan and assigns homework based on the student's performance. Everything is tracked, recorded, and available in one place, making it easier for everyone to understand where students are in their training. The system is undergoing testing, has received rave reviews from students and instructors. AOPA also provides industry training tailored to your specific needs to help you become a top-performing school. Our two-day course helps flight schools understand what students need and how to deliver that. We have developed an online version specifically for flight instructors based on the many requests from schools. We have also a course to help you with marketing. We'll soon have a course to help you understand the fundamentals of financial reporting and planning. Our monthly Flight School Connector online event helps you network with other flight schools and learn from them. In a broader sense, AOPA is very busy keeping the general aviation world aloft. On the legislative front, we have been working with the FAA during the pandemic to ensure that pilots get the extensions and relief they need to stay current. We continue to call for greater relief with annual inspections and instructor certifications. We are pushing the FAA hard to address the delays with the special issuance process. Perhaps most important to you, we are pushing the FAA to address the shortage of DPEs. Our Air Safety Institute created two valuable guides to help pilots and aircraft owners to safely return to the skies during the pandemic. One to assist both rescue pilots and planes. A COVID-19 state-by-state guide to help pilots navigate state and local regulations. These guides have been downloaded thousands of times. And while we're doing everything we can help today's pilots, we have a really sharp eye on the future. Our free high school aviation STEM curriculum reaches now more than 8,000 students this fall in over 450 classrooms. 37% of those students are from minority backgrounds. 23% are female. The pilot population must become more diverse and more inclusive. In short, and in closing, it is time to celebrate aviation. GA flights and operations around the country have returned to and exceeded pre-COVID levels. GA ops are up 20% as measured at the top 77 airports from the FAA. On most days, there are more 172s in the skies than any other aircraft, including the 737. I'm very bullish about where we are, where we're going. Blue skies to all.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, you really are the front door to aviation, and you're very often the role models, the very first pilots that aspiring aviators meet. We'd like to talk about some of the things we're doing to support your efforts and help make the flight training community stronger. To do that, I'm joined by some of my colleagues today, and I'm going to invite them each to introduce themselves. Pablo, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, Elizabeth. So my name is Pablo Maurelia, and I'm Senior Director of Flight Training Technology. So I deal with all technology-related projects or issues, I guess you could call them, within You Can Fly. And I think shortly you'll be hearing about one of the probably the cooler ones that I'm doing, so stay tuned.
Thanks, Pablo. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chris Moser, and I work with flight schools. I'm the Senior Director of Flight Training Education, and so I work on the same team with Pablo, and we work to build educational resources for both CFIs and flight schools, in addition to helping design the educational part of the tech that Pablo was hinting at.
And we're also joined by Keith West. Keith, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Keith West, and my position is Senior Director for Flight School Business Support. I work with flight schools to help them deliver better flight training experiences.
Great. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about the AOPA Flight Training Advantage app. Pablo, you're leading the charge on this one, and you've got a whole session on it a little bit later, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the app is and how you can use it.
Sure. So we wanted to kind of improve upon existing flight training techniques and processes, and so we built an adaptive training app, and that of portals for the student and the owner, and an iPad app. And we do a lot of things that I think probably a lot of people do, which is we record lessons, and you can see stuff that's within the lesson, see what's coming up. However, the big difference is the adaptability. So this is an adaptive training app. So there really is no way of knowing what's coming up in the sense of the next lesson. Those are not prescribed, not pre-written or anything. So the logic actually just goes back and takes a look at the lesson that was just graded by the instructor within the cockpit. And we take a look at the entire history of the training for the student. And from there, we create a new lesson. And within that lesson, we also we assign homework. And so I think that's probably the coolest thing, right? Is so there really won't be any two students at a school probably by the third, fourth lesson where their lessons are the same because it literally adapts to the training strengths of each student.
So this is really a lot about getting students through the process in a way that's more efficient and more effective, and maybe helping them avoid some of those plateaus. How does that work?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've made it so that as the student is learning, those grades are taken into consideration for anything that's proficient, maybe things that are starting to fall behind, like maybe landings. And so it just takes all that into account. And so what we've done is instead of, we've taken out the hammering of something, right? So every week we're going to do landings, or steep turn, steep turn, steep turn. We've taken that out, and there's, without going into all of the logic, because it's a lot. In its base terms, it's basically we take time off from things that aren't being learned. And by that, I mean based on grades, if they don't hit a proficient grade. If something does become proficient, then we don't do it for a set amount of time so that we, because it's proficient, we can move on to other learning. And, we spread things out into pre-solo and solo. And so there's a real flow of things. So the student's constantly learning, or at least feeling as if they're still invested in what's coming. There's still things to learn.
So that process is really keeping the students excited. Now, as a flight instructor, what does that look like for me? How am I using this?
So I think that's probably one of the coolest things. So basically, it's almost training in a box or an iPad. So this is an iPad-only app, and so what it is it'll have all of your students' history, every student, exactly where they're at, It'll give you the ability to have stage checks, a instructor take over training if you can't make it, if you're the primary instructor and you can't train that particular day. You don't have to cancel a student. And the instructor can pick up the app, take that student for that lesson, and see the exact history of where they're at, how they've done, and what's next. You don't have to come up with, hey, what did you do, and where are we going to go from here? And then it also keeps track of everything. So the number of hours, flight hours, what's left in the regulations that have to be covered, ground. And then there's actually references to all the activities within the ACS and any kind of FAA regulation that's related to a private pilot. So it really does keep everything, all of your paperwork, let's call it, all in one area, easy to access, and really at a moment's notice from anywhere.
So that sounds like a real time saver for me as a flight instructor. I know Keith and Chris, you've both used this with students. What has your experience been?
Well, I really enjoy using it with my students. I've put several students through it, and what I really liked about it is, just like Pablo said, it makes it easy as a flight instructor because you're given a lesson and the prep is assigned, so the student knows what we're going to be doing for that flight. But what I really like is that it provides each activity throughout the lesson, so you have your iPad in the cockpit with you, that you mark how the student did, and so the ACS standards are built in, and so you can put on a 1 to 5 scale what the student did, and so there's this complete record that's always there of what you did with that student on that day, as well as what their performance level was. And so I've never been able to have, just writing down notes, this much detailed information before.
And I would say that one of the other things that's really useful about it is that within the lessons, within the prep for the lessons, there are tips for both the student in performing these different activities and maneuvers and everything else. And there's also tips for the instructor. So especially for someone who's a newer instructor that is still building their bag of tricks, there's a whole bunch of advice and tricks from experienced instructors that are built right into it. I think that's going to be a great use for people that are getting started, as we know often happens with flight training.
So this is in beta testing right now, is that right, Pablo?
That's correct. And it's funny because a lot of things that both Chris and Keith mentioned are things that we're getting absolutely positive reviews on. We're at several schools with several instructors and a lot of students. And certain things like the activity index that Chris mentioned with all the notes to the pilot and the teaching tips, all that stuff, that's actually been one of the things that's been the biggest surprise that's loved by everybody. But I've visited one of the schools themselves as they were learning it, and we get everything from, wow, this is going to make my job easier, to my job is really easy now. And those are great side effects, right? We're trying to move the students along, but if the instructors think their job is easier as well, that's just, to me, that's great.
And if you're a flight school owner, there's some benefits for you too in this, right?
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, there's an owner portal. The owner portal itself has a different view, of course, than a student would or an instructor. And so they get to see their entire school on a dashboard. They get to see how many students, how many instructors, and those are obvious things. But within that, they can also download basically everything in their school for all their students, all their instructors, instructor-student pairs. They can create their own reports. They can see exactly how many hours, how many flight hours, training hours. They can pick up patterns. Maybe they just want to see how the instructors are teaching, if they're following their curriculum, stuff like that. All that stuff's in there, and so they can basically use it as they wish. They can, as detailed as they'd like, but all the information is in there at a top level for them.
Now, I understand that you have a whole session on this today at Migration. Can you tell us what you're going to cover and how people can tune in?
Absolutely. So, if you think this is something, stick around. 58 minutes, 37 seconds of your best time you'll ever have with this app. So I cover the student portal, I cover the owner's portal and full demos, and the CFIs. So I look at the iPad app and I basically take it, not top to bottom because it's a lot, and so in an hour I couldn't do it all, but I give the high points of it, and I do mention some of the other things, but it's really a way to get familiar with it and to see if you'd like to use it. And at the end, I even mentioned about beta testing itself. So there's just a lot of information in there, and I think with the demos, it'll be quite informative.
Excellent. What's the name of that session so people can tune in?
Flight training. Is there an app for that? And I do answer the question, so stick around.
Terrific. Thanks, Pablo. Keith, I'd like to bring you on here into this conversation for a minute. One of the things Mark mentioned was the Flight School Connector, and that's one of our newest offerings for flight schools. You've been leading up that effort. Can you tell us a little about it?
Yes, well, as we have put on courses and various programs for flight schools over the past few years, when we would get feedback, one of the things that they said they valued more than anything was the ability to be able to network and talk with other flight school owners and managers. And so we've been trying to build that into more programs as we go along. But when the shutdowns happened, and we needed to get a lot of information out to the flight schools to try to help them be able to navigate all the new things that were changing, we found that an online forum type of format worked pretty well. And we decided, well, this is working so well, why not just extend it and make it a regular feature? And so we have been doing it the first Wednesday of every month. And we bring the schools on, and we have like a little bit of news talking about what's going on as far as the flight training industry. Then we have an educational segment, and so we have a little bit of education. We typically then interview a flight school owner or manager about what they're finding, how they're finding success and the challenges that they're having. And then the last portion of it is basically a roundtable where everybody can pitch in and ask questions of other people on the call and any questions or thoughts that they might have.
So you're really overcoming the geographic limits. Often there's only one or two flight schools in an area. It can be tough for flight school owners to get to know each other, to get to talk, and this way they can talk with people all across the country.
Yep, precisely. And it's kind of neat because a few of them had concerns about competitive nature, but what we really found out is that the schools are so widely dispersed. I mean, just yesterday we had all the way from Alaska to Florida represented. So typically you don't have worried about the flight school on the other side of the field or something like that. So we are really getting a great mix of sizes and locations of schools all across the country.
And you mentioned that you start off with kind of an educational section. What kind of topics are you covering, and how do you choose them?
Well, we rely on the people who are showing up to tell us what they want covered. So far, we've had we just had one yesterday talking about motivation. How does a flight school owner maintain motivation when you're doing the same thing every day? And so we talked about that. We have more detailed topics in talking about finance, and we've also have marketing and any other type of thing that a flight school operationally would tend to come across.
And then you mentioned that you use some of your participants as guests, interviewing some of the flight school owners. What kind of things are they sharing with the group?
That is really fun, and I've been gratified that everyone that I have asked to come on, and it's usually someone that I've seen on one of the calls, and they say something interesting. Like we recently talked to an owner of a school in Charleston who had hosted the head of the SBA at their school, and they were also just getting ready to start the 141 process, so they came and talked about that. And then some other schools on the call had suggestions about the best way to go about this 141 process. And so that's what we're finding quite often when we have these experts, somebody who's running their own school and they've had these particular challenges. They'll say something and other people will ask questions, and so that we can get that information shared.
So it sounds like this is really a collaborative process more than a competitive one, and I think that's something we need in the flight training community.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we've talked about a couple times, because if we improve the industry as a whole, and it's going to improve everybody and make it better for all of us. So I don't really think that the competitive issue comes in all that often. It's just we all want to support each other. We all want to have more people who have a positive experience with their flight training, and that's what we're in it for.
So if someone wants to be part of one of these upcoming sessions, how do they do that?
That's a great question. So we put out a notice in Flight School Business. So if you're signed up for that newsletter, that would be one way to do it. Or you can send me an email at keith.west@aopa.org, and I will be happy to put you on the list.
So something else that you've been working a lot on, Keith, are some training courses that we offer for CFIs and flight schools and flight school personnel. What was the genesis of those, and what are some of the topics that you cover?
When we first started looking at this, the whole package of what we needed to do to improve the flight training experience, because we want more people to actually finish their flight training, and so we figured, what are the various elements of that? And Pablo with the app, that's a big part of it. But we wanted to support the schools as well, and so we looked at the issues that they've been facing, and we have been surveying people in the flight training industry for a long time, and we've had a couple different studies, and we referenced those. And what we found out over and over, like the number one issue, was that flight schools were having a problem delivering great customer service. And there were a number of reasons for that. A lot of people come to own or manage a flight school coming up through the aviation ranks, and not necessarily customer service. And also, who's most responsible for delivering customer service in a flight school? Well, it's the instructors, and there tends to be a lot of turnover with instructors as people leave for different jobs with the airlines, etc. And so our very first course was it's a customer experience course, and so it's a 2-day course as we originally established it, and we have delivered it here in Frederick, and also on the road several times. And so we've gotten schools from all over the country to attend this customer service course, and it is for owners, managers, anybody that works in a flight school. And it's a very practical course where at the end we provide step-by-step how to handle particular situations. And we even had a lot of fun shooting videos, like particular situations, like say a billing issue comes up, and we have a video showing different ways to handle that.
So I've been lucky enough to be in some of those 2-day courses, and that is a really fun format. People work together, they share their stories, they share ideas, but of course that's not really practical right now. So what are you doing to serve folks these days?
Well, that's great too, because as soon as we had some of these classes, the first request we got was, well, how can we be able to deliver it without having to send people to Frederick or a location and have them off of work for a couple of days? And so we started to work pretty soon on a way to deliver it electronically. And so that's what we have been working on this year. And we're right at the final video reviewing stages of making this available. And what we did was compress the course. It's between 4 and 5 hours long, and it's still very practical, but it's oriented more specifically towards flight instructors, because that seems to be the biggest need. And so we're really excited about this, and people have been asking about it, and we just can't wait to roll it out so that flight instructors can get that really great information about how to deliver great customer service.
So we all know that great customer service keeps people coming back, but there are also issues around running the business of a flight school, and you've got some training for that as well, right?
Exactly, and one of the first course that people were asking for, first topic that we addressed, is marketing. And so we have a full-day marketing course, and we have also delivered that online. In fact, we were about to deliver the in-person course when the lockdowns happened, and so we retooled it a little bit to be able to deliver it online. But it's delivered in 4 modules, and we start with the fundamentals of marketing and how it applies to flight schools, because there's a lot of information on marketing in general, but we wanted something specific that addressed the needs of flight schools. And we talk about how to do specific techniques like advertising, online advertising, PR, that sort of thing. Also, how to build your community, because I think one of the things that makes a flight school successful is that they have a community of people around it who keep coming back. And the last step of it is we develop a marketing plan for your flight school over the next year, so that you will have, when you walk away from the training, you'll have laid out steps for what you can be doing next to be improving the marketing of your school.
So people who come to these classes are really getting practical tools that they can take back to their schools and put to work right away.
Yes, and that was one of the fundamental principles as we were looking at these classes, because I think that we have all had the experience of going to workshops and seminars, and you're excited about getting the information, and you're excited about the first couple days afterwards, but what change in behavior are you able to experience? And so we want all of the courses that we do to have that step-by-step of the actual concrete actions that you can take to put some of these practices into place, and so that you can improve your school.
And then in that same vein, I think you have another course in the works right now.
I am working on it right now, as a matter of fact, and it is about finance and bookkeeping. And so it lays out the fundamentals of finance about how you can set up your books and how financial statements look, and so that you'll be able to have a better control and understand the various levers that you can pull to be financially successful with your business, to have successful management using those financial statements.
So you've got a session here at Migration too, and I think that's part of what you're addressing. Tell folks what it's called and how they can get there.
Yes, it's what you can learn from your financial statements, and it's one of the programs that is available here at Migration.
Super, thank you, Keith. Chris, I'd like to bring you into this conversation a little bit now. Something I know this audience is familiar with, the Flight Training Experience Survey and Awards. We had to do something a little different this year. Would you like to talk about that?
Absolutely. Of course, we all, I think, we've been pretty familiar with the awards program, and the other part that, of course, happened this year was the COVID and all the lockdowns and the challenges that caused. And just as we were ready to launch it, lockdowns were happening, and so we decided to reach out to a number of schools and also just take a hard look at what was going on in the industry with schools being shut down and training being paused. And as a result, we decided to take a pause this year on that normal friendly competition, and instead we focused on, well, what can we do to maybe celebrate and to share stories about how people are overcoming the challenges and being resilient when it comes to the environment this year. And that led us to start the Flight Training Experience project for this year. And basically what it is we asked flight training students, schools, instructors, whomever was involved in it, to tell us about what inspired them to fly, how they overcame challenges, what they were doing to carry on with kind of the mission and their goals, despite all the things that were happening with COVID.
So we've been lucky enough to see those entries, and there are some really great stories out there. How can this audience get a look at those stories too?
Well, actually, one of the sessions that you'll be able to find is our premiere of the Flight Training Experience project, and where we had a number of entries, and we ended up editing down and selecting some, and so that's been made into a video that you'll see Stephen Schroeder and I, who work on that team, put together, and with the help of some folks here at AOPA. So that's really cool to check that out. And then we're going to check out the media channels as well, because I know there are some stories that will be coming out in AOPA's media channels. And then the other thing you can do is, if you'd like to see all the different entries as people put them in, look for the hashtag FTE project on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All those places had entries from people either putting pictures or stories or videos in.
So I'm really glad we got the chance to celebrate the flight training community this year, even though we couldn't do our normal awards. But a lot of people were disappointed about that and are already looking ahead to next year. What can we expect for 2021, Chris?
Biggest thing is we are planning on hopefully a return to quote unquote normal, as much as we're able to do that. So we'll see what that looks like. But we have every intention of running the awards next year just like normal, and very much looking forward, hopefully, to seeing everybody in person when we run the award ceremony next fall.
Now, when schools participate in the survey and the awards, they get a lot of detailed information back from us. What kind of things can they learn from that survey?
So one of the things that we work really hard to do is to take that data and to create report cards so they could see the feedback their customers are saying. And of course, the hope being that they can adjust course, take the things that they're doing well, continue to do those, and take the things where they maybe didn't do as well as they thought, and to try to figure out, well, what is it that we can do better? And so we provide this detailed report card that lays out every question that was asked, how their students answered, including a net promoter score. And that data is actually really cool, because I was actually able to take that data and use it for a research project this past year too, that I'll be talking about here at Migration as well.
So you've got a session where you talk about that and the kind of data that came out of that survey process. What's it called? How do people see it?
Sure. Again, another on-demand session. Just look for my name, Chris Moser, and it's called Does Good Teaching Drive Customer Satisfaction? And what I did was I took the Net Promoter Score and I did a statistical analysis to see, using various best practices in teaching, did they drive customer satisfaction on that Net Promoter Score? And it was pretty cool. The results were quite powerful, and even in a statistical sense as well very powerful. So I go into that and I explain a lot about the research that I did and the different techniques or strategies that instructors in schools can use.
So one of the things I love about the survey and the awards is, yeah, it's a friendly competition and you do sometimes get to take home top honors, which is always exciting. But maybe even more important, you get to learn something about your business and your students and how to deliver the best possible flight training. So there's really more to it than just filling out a survey.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is looking for that insight. And I know that I've spoken to a number of schools over the years that they literally wait for that report card. And we've even now in current years, we've shortened the time that it's open because typically the survey is open during June, July. We'll open it sometime in May. We've shortened it up and we've worked the process to get those report cards out faster because I've been told by a couple of schools that they wait for their report card and then they have sort of a high level staff meeting where they strategize how they're going to adjust their plans for the following year based on the insights that they gather from it. So pretty cool, I think.
It's great that we can deliver some value to the schools that way and that so many schools are participating. I hope everybody will be on board with us for next year. I know we're looking forward to it. But now I'd like to switch gears a little bit again and talk about some of the other types of resources that AOPA has for flight schools and flight training professionals. And probably one of the biggest is a 6-month subscription, absolutely free, to Flight Training Magazine for students. Would one of our instructors like to tell us about how they've used that?
Sure, I'll jump in on that. So Flight Training Magazine, I know, is a great resource for student pilots. It often will cover various maneuvers that you can do. It has tips for instructors as well. It even has things for instrument students. So it covers a pretty wide gamut, and it's a great way to give your students something other than just a textbook to read, because it's written not as from a textbook perspective, but giving articles. And in fact, I know that I was chatting with Keith not that long ago, and he mentioned that he used to use it even as a way to not only share the information, but as a marketing tool as well.
Keith, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, well, one of the tools that we make available, and I can show this here, is a special edition of Flight Training Magazine. It's the You Can Fly version, and most flight schools should have received that this year. And if you need additional copies, call Member Services and ask, and we'll be happy to send you more copies out. But what it does is it talks to students who are interested in flight training or maybe in the very early stages of flight training, and it will cover what the experience is like, what type of airplanes, using simulators, and just all and how to finance even. And of course, that's always a big question of students. How do I finance this training? But that magazine that we make available, and like I said, it's specifically for flight schools to help you sell the flight training experience, and we would be happy for you to hand those out.
And then there's another publication that's really just for flight school owners and operators to help them with their business, and that's Flight School Business News. Keith, you're pretty heavily involved in that one.
Well, yes, and that is great for flight schools because it comes out about every 2 weeks, and it's topics specifically for how to run your flight school. And so it can be topics like customer service or finance or marketing, all the sort of things that we talk about in the courses. They go on a bi-weekly basis, and if you're not signed up for it, it really is a great tool to find out first information about what's going on, as well as longer term, more enduring topics.
So that one is really for the flight school owners and operators, but we don't want to leave out the CFIs. And we have an incredible publication called CFI to CFI. And Chris, I know you are involved with that one.
Yes, CFI to CFI comes out of the Air Safety Institute, but it's really cool because it is literally, like as you said, Elizabeth, just a focused thing with articles for CFIs. It's got teaching tips, and it's a great publication specifically for being a better instructor, and often will sometimes pull things from flight training and other resources. That's a great one too, and you can sign up for that one free, and it comes out. I think it's I don't know if it's quite monthly, but it's rarely very regular during the year.
Well, as Mark said right at the start, all of us at AOPA are really committed to creating a great flight training experience, to supporting the flight training community, to helping make your jobs easier, and making it easier for your students as well. So I hope we've been able to whet your appetite with a few of the things that we have on offer, and I sure hope you'll join all of us for the different sessions we've talked about today. Pablo, Keith, and Chris all have a lot more information to deliver. And so I just want to thank you for tuning in. And thanks to Mark as well.